listening to Who's Tom and Dick, a weekly podcast with your hosts, Martin Weavers, fighting stage 4 lung cancer, and Patrick Mortimer, living with heart disease. Why not grab yourself a cup of coffee, sit back, and enjoy the chatter as we discuss and share information, talking about tough subjects, and offering help, support, and motivation with a positive mental attitude.
Morning, Patrick.
Morning, Mart. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad, mate. Not doing too bad. Looking forward to today's interview.
And it doesn't take a lot to get you excited, does it?
It doesn't really, but you know, this one is, and everyone will know why once we start. So I'll introduce our guest today. And as you said, I'm really excited to have someone in who's actually formed the pop group that I actually followed through my childhood. They were the Bay City Rollers, and today we welcome Nobby Clark. Okay, Nobby, so can you tell us how it all began for Nobby and in your pop star career, right from the beginning?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem at all. Good morning and nice to speak to you.
And to you too.
Yeah. Well, how it all started was really I was at Tynecastle School in Edinburgh, and in one of the classes that I took, Derek Longmuir was in the same class. I was sitting in this, I think it was technical drawing or something like that, and we did a lot of practical subjects at that school. I was sitting there just concentrating on what I was doing, but I just heard this rat-a-tat-tat on a couple of desks behind me, and I turned around. It was Derek Longmuir. I didn't really know him at that point. Oh, I saw him in the class, but I didn't really know him. But he had a couple of pencils, and he was playing the drums on his school desk,
Yeah.
So it sort of attracted my attention. I was quite intrigued because I had been singing with the school choir. So a lot of people at school knew me from that. And so after the class was over, I went up to speak to Derek and chatting away. And he said they had a wee band that they practiced in their front room at home and things like that. And anyway, he must have known about me singing with the choir because he asked me to come along and listen to their wee band. And that was in Cally Road in Edinburgh. So I went along there and I sang a couple of songs that I knew. I met Alan there. He had been at Tynecastle School, but had left because he was just slightly older. I met Alan at the rehearsal and we got on like a house on fire, and that was it from there on.
And what was the name of that little band that you had together there then?
Well, they were called the Saxons, and they had the name already.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a couple of youth clubs and things early on with that name, but I think we all knew that wasn't going to be the finished product,
Yeah.
And so we set off to find the right name, and it took a wee while. And then, eventually we came up with the Bay City Rollers. So, and that's an interesting story in itself. I don't know if you want me to explain that one.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had approached Tam Payton actually after we had sort of got on a little bit and had done a lot of practicing and rehearsing and got better. We still weren't very good, but we got better. And so we approached Tam Payton at this club called the Top Story Club in Edinburgh. We were going round the places trying to get gigs, just to play in these clubs. And this one was a pretty famous place. So a lot of the bands wanted to play there. So it just so happens that the guy who ran the club was standing at the door taking the money. His name was Jimmy Craig. And Alan went up to him and said, is there any chance of us getting a gig here? And the guy said, are you any good? And this voice from behind said, I've heard them. They're very good. You should give them a gig. But it was Tam Payton.
Mm.
And so from that night on, we asked them to come to the rehearsal and hear us play together. And, that's how it started off, really. And so Tam took on sort of management, sort of part-time, because we weren't really doing many gigs or anything. Just very young guys,
Yeah, he was a potato dealer or something, wasn't he?
He was. His family had a potato merchant's business. Yeah, well, they used to drive a big lorry, you see, and deliver all the stuff to the chip shops and all that stuff. We all agreed that the Saxons name wasn't really the one we wanted to end up with. But in Tam Payton's house, he had two maps on the wall. One was of Scotland and one was of America. And just for a laugh, it wasn't even we didn't take it too seriously. We just thought it'd be funny because we wanted an American sounding name.
Yeah.
but we weren't quite sure how to go about it. So just randomly, with the eyes closed, we took shots at putting a pin in the map of America, and one landed. The nearest place was Bay City. And how on earth we thought that could make a good band name, I've no idea. But then we tagged on names to the end, and different things like strollers and stompers and all that stuff, and we didn't really think any of that worked. And we actually thought that rollers was too obvious.
Yeah.
What we didn't know was in the background, in Bay City, well, Bay City is a surfing bay, and the waves that come into the bay are quite famous in that part of America because they're called the Bay City Rollers.
Oh,
We
right.
didn't know that.
Ah,
We didn't know that. So it
ah,
was purely coincidence that we fought with the idea of calling putting rollers on the end of Bay City. Eventually, trying other things, we came back and thought, well, you know what? It just works. Let's just go with it.
mm,
And so that became the name, Bay City Rollers, not knowing that these waves were called the Bay City Rollers. So it was quite a coincidence that happened. We found that out years later, of course,
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how it came about.
It certainly is a catchy name. So,
Without a doubt. And I would never have imagined from that day on, when we decided to use that name, that it would become a worldwide famous name and group, But the name itself is known all over the world, everywhere.
yeah, yeah.
I'm quite proud of that,
And obviously that led to being on Top of the Pops and recording
Yeah.
the songs. And I mean, what was that like? I mean, going into a studio, I mean, you'd obviously gigged around Edinburgh and places like that, in clubs, but this is a whole new ball game going into a studio. How did that first come about? And
Yeah. Well, we were a hard-working band, and we were on the road for a long time, a number of years, making the band, the popularity grow and grow and grow. And we became really quite massive in Scotland. I mean, really massive. I mean, no matter where we played, far and wide, all over the country, way up north on the islands, everything. They came from far and wide, and they hitchhiked all over the place to see us. And we hadn't even made a song. We hadn't recorded anything. It was all word of mouth and hard work. And we were spreading outwards, going further down south and things like that before we even had a recording contract or anything. And all these record companies and agents were coming up to see what the noise was all about. Because it spread, people heard about it. We became very well known and very famous in Scotland without making a record. It's quite an unbelievable feat, to be honest. Yeah. But it was hard work, and if you want to get anywhere in life, you got to work hard, and we did. So that was it, and then we eventually signed up with Bell Records, and the very first recording we did, which was "Keep on Dancing," got released, and it took a while to get into the charts because it had this strange phenomenon of fading it out and then having a little space for a minute and then fading it back in again, bringing it straight back in. And the problem with that was that it threw the DJs off because they thought the song was finishing and they would start to talk and it would catch them out. So to begin with, they were a little bit reluctant to play it. But, we got guys to plug it, and the DJs got used to it, and they used the space for a little advert or whatever they wanted to do. And so the plays grew and grew and grew, so it became very popular. And it eventually got to number 9 in the charts. And of course, that was our very first appearance on Top of the Pops. That particular week, Rod Stewart was at number 1 with the Faces doing Maggie May.
Right. Yeah.
And, I remember not directly meeting them, but coming across them in the corridor playing football and being well oiled, because they liked a bit of a party to themselves. And they were pretty all on the way when we sort of bumped into them in the corridor, and we started playing football with them in the corridor to begin with. And we were actually heading to the first rehearsal. They had done the first rehearsal, but the second rehearsal, the party was going really well, and they missed the second rehearsal. So they didn't do a dress rehearsal at all. And they turned up and just did the gig. But it was fantastic. It was a great performance from them.
Yeah.
They had John Peel playing mandolin on that particular show as well.
Oh, that was the show, was it? I remember I've seen that clip several times.
Yeah, that was the one. The trouble is, it was shown in these early days, but then the BBC did a ridiculous thing with all of the Top of the Pops recordings. They recorded over them all,
Yeah.
and it was to save tape, and save money.
Well,
And
it was the same with
unfortunately,
Dad's Army, wasn't it, as well, and programs like that?
yes,
All the
yes,
programs got wiped. It's a shame.
that's it, and that's what happened here. And so the actual original recording doesn't exist. But someone in Norway or Sweden, one of the two, he was a big music fan, and he recorded almost every music program that came out of Britain, the UK. They managed to find a copy of that particular program and that episode of Top of the Pops, and they digitized it, cleaned it up, and everything. And I have one of 3 copies that exist.
Oh, wow.
Crikey.
But I'm unfortunately not allowed to use it commercially, so it's just for my private collection. But maybe one day I'll get over that and I'll show it to everybody. I do intend to use it at some gigs I'm planning coming up, not too far in the future, and I'm going to use it to put on a screen for these gigs that I'm going to be doing soon.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll get to what you're going to do in the future a little bit later. But
what was it like to perform during the peak of the band's popularity then, Nobby?
Well, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful because we had these fans that followed us everywhere. I mean, everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course, after Keep On Dancing, and then we went on to do We Can Make Music and Manana, which was a big hit for us, but it was a different type of song because it was entered into the Luxembourg Grand Prix song contest.
Right.
And that was a kind of similar thing to the Eurovision Song Contest, but it wasn't shown in this country, unfortunately. It was shown all over Europe, and we won that competition. And so that set us off touring around Europe as well. So, again, and even in Europe, very quickly, we gathered an awful lot of fans, and because we did a fair bit of television and everything over there. So it was wonderful. It was just fabulous. And these fans were so dedicated, especially the ones who came originally from Scotland and north of England. And they are still huge Bay City Roller fans.
Yeah.
These original fans are still fans of the Bay City Rollers,
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing. The loyalty is incredible. And they're still there. They're all still there.
Yeah. So we get to 73, 74, and you've recorded Remember, and that's gone in the charts with your voice on the recording. And then you just decided to leave. I mean, did you? I mean, I think you'd given some prior warning, hadn't you, beforehand? But then,
well, at this point, I was 6 years with the band, making them, we're working hard and making the band very popular. 6 years, it was a long time. And the only reason that happened is that because we were serving our time as apprentice joiners and plumbers from the time at school. When we met Tam Payton, I think we were 17 years old.
Yeah.
And we had started apprenticeships. And I remember my mother always said to me, "Look, just finish your time, son, and then you can go and do whatever you like." And that's pretty much what happened, because although we had this massive following in Scotland, we were still trying to do these apprenticeships. And I mean, it was a hard time, because we could be playing away up north in Scotland and getting back at 3 and 4 in the morning, and then getting a couple of hours sleep, and then heading off to the building site or wherever we were working, But we achieved it. And then the day that my apprenticeship was up, I got my certificate and I said, "Bye, I'm off." I'm now a professional musician. And that's when it all really took off after that, So I was a long time with the band. I worked very hard with them, did a lot of things, wrote songs for them, did lots of things. But to begin with Tam Payton, the manager, everything was fine. He was working hard too. And we were all planning how to get to the next stage. And we did it collectively, because Tam wasn't an experienced manager. He had managed local bands. He didn't know anything about the London scene or anything. And so we learned how to do it. Together we learned how to do it, trial and error, really. But it got to the stage later on as time went on that Tam's management of the band became very, I'm trying to find the right word to explain it. It became very obsessed with the band, and very dictatorial, and we were expected to do everything that he wanted us to do, and we just didn't know that. We didn't realize early on that there was sort of grooming going on, because there was people brought in to work with the band like Jonathan King and Chris Denning, who I think the two of them are still in jail for child molesting and all that stuff. These people were brought in. We were put in very difficult and horrible situations with people in the music business that we shouldn't have had to. We spent time with Jimmy Savile. We did charity stuff with Jimmy Savile at children's homes, in fact, all that stuff. All that stuff was going on. And meanwhile, Tam Payton became absolutely dictatorial and obsessed with the members of the band. I was very, very uncomfortable with that,
Yeah.
And he had ways of bringing people down by using personal things against them in front of the rest of the members in the band. And all that stuff was building up and building up. And I just got to the stage where I didn't want to do that anymore.
No.
And so I had told them a year before that I was going to leave the band, but I would stay until they found somebody to replace me. I wasn't out to destroy them or anything like that. I just wanted to get out. It was about 9 months later that they found Les, who was singing with a little Edinburgh band. I think Eric initially found him and took time to see him. So that was pretty much how it got to that stage. But the problem was that I had the last session I did with them, I did 4 songs. One was Remember and Saturday Night and 2 other songs. And both these songs, Remember and Saturday Night, became massive hits around the world. But the Remember, we were going to do Top of the Pops because it got very quickly to number 9 in the charts.
Yeah.
Sorry, eventually it ended up at number 6 in the charts. So it was a big seller. And so I had arranged to go to Top of the Pops to record it. And they always recorded it on a Wednesday night to show it on a Thursday night at 7:00. So it was arranged that I would meet them there at the BBC studios to record it. So I turned up, I flew down, I did everything right. I got there to the desk and I said, I'm Nobby Clark, the lead singer with Bay City Rollers. I'm here to record Top of the Pops. And they looked it up in the book and they said, well, that's strange because it's already been filmed. And I said, well, it can't be. It's impossible. I'm here. I'm here to do it.
Yeah.
They said, no, they made a special arrangement. They came in on the Tuesday and they filmed it with Les McEwen, who had nothing at all to do with the song. They played it on Top of the Pops that Thursday with Les fronting the band, with my voice still on a taped recording of it that he sang over my voice. And I think it was disgusting, actually, a disgusting thing to do.
Because they did the same with Saturday Night in America, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Saturday Night was released over here, and it was a kind of minor hit, but it didn't get promoted. The record company didn't put money behind it. I don't know why they didn't. But later on, it was sent over to Clive Davis in America, who was the head of Arista, and who I mean, originally he was signed with Bell Records, but Bell Records were a subsidiary of Arista. And Clive Davis was the CEO then of the company. They wanted to release the first song in America for the Bay City Rollers, and nobody told Clive Davis I had left the band. That was the unfortunate thing for them, because they first of all played Bye Bye Baby, which the Rollers had recorded here and had a hit here with it after I left. And they put it over to America for Clive Davis to listen to, and he said, no. We can't release this here. It's already been a number one here by the Four Seasons, which was the original written by Bob Gaudio, who was the keyboard player in the Four Seasons. So he rejected that. And the other song they had sent over to him was Saturday Night with my original version of it, my voice on it. He loved it. They said, this is spot on. And they still hadn't told him I'd left the band. But he released my version of it in America, and I was no longer with them. But it got released, and it was in the middle of the football season, and it got played in all the football stadiums across certain parts of America. And you can imagine it was perfect for a American football match because it was S-A-T-U-R-D-A-Y, night, S-A, and the crowds were all singing that. And so that took it into the charts, and it went very quickly up the charts. And at that point, Alan Longmuir phoned me from America and said, you better get your lawyer onto this because it's been released and it's in the charts with your voice on it. So at some point down the line, the final pressing of the song, or whenever it was, they changed the voiceover. But by then, it had already been in the charts, and it was selling millions and millions of copies.
Yeah. I wonder if people noticed this at the time, that, some people have bought a record and it's got a voice on it, and then suddenly, you see somebody else on their TV stations and it's a different voice. But
even when they re-recorded it with Les singing it, they tried to make it as close to sounding to my version as possible.
Yeah.
See? So, and I'm not blaming Les for that. Don't get me wrong.
No.
Les was in the position where he probably at the beginning just did what he was told to do, and that's fine. That's fine. He was a good entertainer, good performer.
Yeah.
So that was it. That's how all that came about.
Yeah.
What do you feel about the band's legacy today?
Well, there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm not particularly, I wouldn't say ashamed of, but I'm not very happy about.
Yeah.
I think the memory of the Bay City Rollers deserves more, And one of the things that goes on that I'm really annoyed about is that the fans are in dispute with each other. There's one group that followed Les that fights with a group that are fans of Eric, and another group that are fans of Woody. They don't talk to other bands that are, fans of Alan, and it's just terrible, And I've been working hard trying to get it to knit together so that they stop this hatred, and it is hatred. Believe me, it's very deep.
It is. I've read it.
Yeah, it's really bad. And at one time, a lot of it was fired at me. And because I had been talking about things that happened with Les, not particularly blaming Les, but saying, this is what happened and it shouldn't have happened. And people came back, a lot of the fans came back at me with some real anger.
Yeah.
And I decided I've taken enough of it. I'm going to fight back. And I did. And I pulled and I challenged them.
At the end of the day, Nobby, you know the true story of what went on.
Absolutely.
And the fans make up the bits in between.
They do, and that's unfortunate actually, because they'd rather not know the truth. They're happy to live with the illusion that they've created themselves, But it's got a bit better though because of the fight back, that I got involved in, and that involved a lot of my followers who supported me and backed me up and came back at the fans that were sending abusive messages to me. And so the good thing about that is that a lot of them have come over to my side.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Even now, after all this time, the dedication to the Bay City Rollers and the music is quite phenomenal.
It never wanes. No, it never wanes.
Quite phenomenal. And you're talking worldwide as well. There's millions of fans still out there who maybe don't directly get involved in the fan groups and all that stuff, but they're all out there, and they're still very interested in the band and the music. because the music's great. You know, when you know, from Keep on Dancing, they were all great dance tunes. You know, Keep on Dancing, Remember, Saturday Night. Then he went on to Shang-a-Lang and Summer Love Sensation, and all the songs that Bill Martin and Phil Coulter wrote together and stuff like that. These are great songs, and they're dance floor fillers, and they still are.
Yeah.
You know, and the younger generation now are having basic roller parties, and there's things going to be coming up that will keep it moving forward. And you know, I've done so many documentaries and various things like that. There's such a really strong interest that still exists.
It's nice that it's something that you started way back in '66, wasn't it? And it's still continuing to this day. But so you got to the time where you've now left the Rollers, and then your life sort of took a bit of a change, didn't it? Really, with
it did.
Probably got in with the wrong people. Some of them, you know, like the Mars Club and things like that.
But maybe I went looking for it. That's the trouble, you see.
Right.
Because I really believe. I mean, it's documented in my book, The Lost Roller, that you know, I've been very, very honest. I put the whole thing down in that book, and because I wanted people to know the truth. I didn't want people making up their own truth about it. And the truth is this: I went through a long period of very severe alcoholism, and you know, and I really honestly believe this, that I was an alcoholic when I was born. The only thing missing was the alcohol. Because as soon as I touched alcohol, something different happened to me than happened to my people around me. And it became, quite obvious that there was something wrong. And so for a few years, I gradually got worse and worse and worse and worse until it was completely out of control. You know, without going into any further detail, it very nearly killed me. Yeah. And I ended up in a residential clinic down in the borders of Scotland for nearly 5 months, actually. I was very, very ill, very ill.
Yeah.
And that kind of saved my life, you know.
Yeah, because I've obviously read your book. Patrick hasn't. You can tell that it's actually written by you and not, because so many people have ghostwriters, don't they, and things like that.
Oh, I know. I set out to do that, not knowing, not having written a book before, written a lot of stories and a lot of lyrics and all that kind of thing. But it's a different setup to be looking at your own life and writing that down. Very easy to change the facts of certain things because you don't want people to know. But I decided, if I'm going to do this, I'll ask the permission of my ex-wife and my daughter before I do it, and my family as well, because it's going to affect everybody. They all said, go ahead and write it. I just don't want to read it.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people now then how they can get hold of your book, The Lost Roller?
Yes, it's available on Amazon. That's the main outlet I would advise people to go for, because you can go directly to my publisher, but they're in America. And it's more costly to do that, because obviously if it's sent out from there, postage and packaging and all that stuff. So you can get it very quickly on Amazon. It's called The Lost Roller by Nobby Clark. And it's available now. If you want to buy it, you can get it quite easily.
Yeah, I actually got it through Amazon, but we have a lot of American listeners, so they might be able to get it in America anyway. So,
well, if they go to the SBPRA publishers website, SBPRA publishers, book publishers, they can attain it there. You know.
Yeah, I recommend the book to any roller fan. I think some people, you know, just associate the Bay City Rollers with the last 5 lineup, and it's nice that, you know, you were in it right at the beginning with Alan and Derek. And
I've had a lot of contact from not just from America, but other places, Japan and other places, who didn't really know anything about my story. All they knew was the so-called classic lineup, which was the 5 guys that completed the whole act. And I think when they began to read part of my story, it really fascinated them because they didn't know much about it, and they didn't realize that I did all these songs that Les sang later on,
Yeah.
that I had the original hits with them, and it was my voice on. Do you know, I should say this here and now, my biggest gripe about the whole thing is that the record company carried on releasing all my recordings and still do up to today and will do in the future, and I'm not getting paid for it. It's really a bone of contention with me, but the fact is, there's 35 albums which I have the evidence of that was presented in the court case in New York with my vocals on them, and they haven't paid me for it. We're talking millions of sales, and they're still doing it. And that's only the ones I have the evidence of. I've been told of at least another 10 that I've not been able to get the hard copies to prove, because I won't put anything forward unless I've got the evidence and I can prove it.
No.
And I made that very clear to everybody when I got involved in the court case, that everything I say here and everything I present here, I can back it up with the evidence. And I did that,
Yeah.
Only to be dismissed from the case because they filed a motion, the band filed a motion and their lawyers to have me dismissed on the statute of limitations. Not that I didn't do all this stuff, that's another story. Nobody argued against that. They just thought, we need to get him out of this because he's winning.
Yeah, that's right. But now you're in control of your music and what you want to do. So tell us what you're doing now, because you released a couple of albums, didn't you? A solo.
Well, I did. I've got three. There's 3 solo albums out there, circulating around, which is called "If Only." I don't think it's available any longer. But the other 2, "Going Home" and "On the Inside," they are available, and you can get them on iTunes and probably on Amazon. There's a lot of these other. Check a lot of the sites, and you'll probably be able to find them.
You was number 1 on one of these vintage charts, wasn't you, Nobby?
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed quite a bit of success there actually on the chart, the Apple Radio Chart of Gold, because I took the number 1 spot, I think, for 7 or 8 weeks, and other songs that were released and put in for voting on that chart are still in there. And some of the Rollers tracks, the basic Rollers songs that I had originally recorded, have been released, and they're actually marked Nobby Clark originals. That's Saturday Night and Remember and Keep on Dancing and them all. So Manana too, and some others. So it's been great, and people have been voting them in high positions in the chart. So I'm delighted about that. But I've just released a new one.
Right.
And nobody's actually heard it yet, but it's been entered as a new entry very low in the heritage charts. But I'm going to be putting up the video for that very soon. The only reason I'm holding back on that slightly at this very moment in time is because there's been interest shown in that song for something else that I can't divulge right now, but it's quite exciting. So
we like things like this because we try and guess.
It's quite exciting. So. And that will be revealed in the not too distant future as well. So,
listening to your story, Nobby, have you got any regrets, or would you do anything differently, knowing what you know now?
The one thing I would do, looking back on it all, is I would have gathered the band together, and I would have said to them, if we don't take back control from Tam Payton, we can still allow him to manage the band, but we must take away this suppression, this overall control that he has, because it's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
We lost so many members of the band, good members of the band in earlier days, who were not just great-looking guys and for the fans to appreciate, but they were also great musicians. Mm-hmm. But we lost them because of Tam's regime.
Yeah,
and the way that he handled people. So that's a big regret of mine, that I didn't gather the band together and say, this is the option, or else I'm going to leave.
Yeah,
we take back control from Tam. He can still manage the band, but he's not going to do. You see, a lot of what Tam Payton did was based on Brian Epstein's book.
Right.
Brian Epstein being the Beatles manager, as most people will know.
Yeah.
But that he took a lot of the ideas from that. But Brian Epstein didn't run the Beatles like Tom Payton ran the Bay City Rollers, with absolute total control, and needed to know where we were 24 hours a day, every day.
Right.
I mean, honestly, it was horrendous. And Brian Epstein didn't do that. He kept certain information away from the fans to keep the image right. But John Lennon had a girlfriend, and Paul McCartney had a girlfriend, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't allowed to have that. It was banned, you know.
Yeah.
It was banned because, and I'm not saying that we should have gone crazy or anything. I'm just saying that the regime nearly split up the band many times and lost many members.
But it was like a dictatorship, wasn't it, really, Nobby?
It was dictatorship, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more to it than that as well, which I'm not going to now. But the point, the point I'm making is that we should have kept more control, because eventually, when we signed with Bell Records, we were just puppets.
Yeah,
we were puppets who had to do what we were told to do. Yeah, and that's all very well up to a point. But there's certain things that we wanted to do and have an influence in, and make a contribution to where we were going. But Tam had such a hold on the band that we didn't really get the opportunity. So I've got quite a few regrets. I wish I hadn't left the band, but I felt I had no choice.
Yeah.
If I hadn't left the band, I probably would have ended up recording Shang-a-Lang. I probably would have ended up doing Summer Love Sensation, maybe even Bye Bye Baby, because Bye Bye Baby, by the way, was a song that we did as a live song in our set way back. And it was only Alan, after I left, Alan suggested that they think about maybe recording it as a single. And they did, and it was massive. It was absolutely massive. But it was my song. We did it way before that,
Yeah.
So lots of things. So I have a big influence in this band,
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't realize. So there you go.
Well, Nobby, I think I want to say to you, thank you very much for agreeing to come on our podcast. And
not at all. You're very welcome.
Yes, thanks, Nobby, for taking the time today and telling us all about your life story.
Most enjoyable, and thank you.
Certainly, for those who didn't know the story, they do now. I mean, I've been a lifelong fan, so I've known the story. I've read it again in your book, and I recommend people to get this book.
Well, good stuff, and thank you. That's very nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nobby, and best wishes and good luck for the future.
Well, same to you.
Thank you, Nobby.
Bye.
So, thank you very much, Nobby Clark, for that. The lost Bay City Roller there. Not a lot of people knew his story until now, I guess.
And not a lot of people probably knew of him. If, as I said, in the interview, a lot of people think there was only 5 Bay City Rollers, but there's obviously the ones before and there was some after.
Yeah, we hear this story so many times. I mean, recently, a lot of these major stars they're making films of, and I remember watching the Elvis Presley film, and his manager was exactly the same. They seem to control and run the lives of these guys. I guess when you're shooting for fame, you'll do anything almost to get there, and you rely on these guys to be honest and have integrity, but they don't. All they're looking after really is themselves.
This guy, Tam, he had to run them, but it is the way you run it.
I feel he was taking more advantage of them than running them.
That's a different story altogether, that one.
Exactly. Anyway, guys, thanks again for staying with us and listening to that interesting interview today.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit off topic, but we try and include a bit of everything on here.
Yeah, and I haven't even got time for a joke of the week.
No, never mind. I'm sure our listeners were crying in their sleep about that one.
And no edit and a cheer in there.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yes, and have a great week as well.
Same place, same time next week.
Who's Tom and Dick podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much for listening, everyone. Bye.
You've been listening to the Who's Tom and Dick podcast with your hosts, Martin Weavers and Patrick Mortimer. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. New episodes are available every Friday. Thanks for tuning in.